I found it!
Where are you?
The office!
Okay. Jesus Christ! You're ridiculous. Where's my phone?
Oh, I was using it to film this thing.
Seriously? You know, payback's a bitch.
Hey y'all, what's up? It's Kellen with K&T Do Halloween. Welcome to another makeover video. Let's get right into it. First things first, I'm just going to do some work on the costuming. I'm just using a lab jacket with some Umbrella Corp logos that I had. We have a bunch of them and use them for anybody who comes to our house to hand out candy for Halloween. Now I'm going to be working on the stake. I'm going to be transforming this into a handicap sign. It works really well with our theme because we have a retirement home that has zombies. I'm just using some Velcro, hot gluing it onto the stake, and then hot gluing a piece onto the back of the sign. I want to make sure I can take this off for storage. The sign is made out of very thin and lightweight aluminum. It weighs next to nothing, so it really didn't affect the prop. To help add some realism without adding any weight, I'm just using some EVA foam and creating some nuts and bolts to attach to the face of the sign as well as the back of the stake. I just grabbed a bolt from the garage in a size that I liked, traced it out on the EVA foam, and then cut it out with an X-Acto knife. I then sanded the pieces on a fine grit sandpaper before moving on and attaching them to the front of the sign with hot glue as well as the underside with hot glue. I now need to take it apart, so I'm just snipping the zip ties at the wrist so I can remove the sign with the hands and also take the jacket off. I have to say this prop was really well sculpted, however I was pretty disappointed to look at the box and then the actual paint job of the face. Here's all the separate pieces before they go into their black base paint, and then we get down to the fun stuff. I decided that I wanted to change the color of his undershirt. For some reason, I think Spirit went with a gray undershirt just because the blood really doesn't pop on it, and I think that's also why they had the shirt attached in the front, just to kind of dull down the gore factor of this prop. So I grabbed an extra large white t-shirt, I just laid the original pattern piece on top of it, cut out the same exact shape, and I actually had some hook and loop Velcro and copied the pieces. I didn't want to destroy this original piece in case later on I decided, I didn't like it. And if you see my videos before, you know I always like to start with a black base paint. Moving on to some of the detail painting on the stake, I've taped off the nuts and bolts that I created earlier, and I'm just using a metallic paint, 2 coats to go over all of these pieces. I will be going back and rusting and aging them later, but I just wanted to hit all these first, that way I can let them dry while I'm painting some of the other pieces. Moving on to the hands, I'm pulling out some light gray paint and I'm just dry brushing to bring out the texture. I always like to start this off, especially when I'm doing zombie painting. It helps guide me with the sculpt and really see the texture underneath and how I'm going to paint on top of it. Now I'm moving on to the head. I'm going to be going back over these pieces 2 or 3 times just to help build up texture. It was super wet, rainy, and nasty this week, so I had trouble with paint drying. So if you noticed in the video, I'm using a sponge and a glove. I'm just super impatient and don't like to wait for things to dry at this point, so I'm just pushing forward. It helps blend the paint a little bit. You will fight it, but... Now when initially building up texture for zombies, what I like to do is hit all the high points and blend out from there. So the brow bone, the cheekbones, anywhere that's going to be a high point in the face, in the sculpt, or in the head, I like to hit those with the paint first and then just kind of blend out from there. Now I'm moving on to building up some base texture. I've got my trusty airbrush out, loaded up with some deep purple paint that I mixed with a little bit of a flesh tone. I'm basically just going through and creating a texture that'll be underneath the flesh color I put on top of it. I'm also going through and painting the nails and the teeth with a cream and ivory color, and I'm also going in with a detail brush and some ivory paint to hit all the high spots around the nose, the brows, the lips, and the wounds to make sure that they really pop. Now moving on to airbrushing the flesh, I've mixed up the color in a separate cup in a large batch, that way I don't have to keep mixing it. I started with the hands and then moved on to the face. I always like to do this and then go back to the hands just to make sure the two match. I'm just working in circles, building up texture, and working out from the high spots as I go. Now going in with some dark red paint just to start creating some base texture for all of my wounds. This is really where it starts to come alive and look awesome. I'm now going back through and really enhancing those wounds with my airbrush. I'm adding some black veining to the side because we will be adding a syringe. This is a Resident Evil zombie after all. It's starting to look awesome. Now I'm just grabbing some wet from Fright Props and applying it to the mouth as well as the nails. And moving on to the blood. So I'm working with a small detail brush and I'm starting with the hands. And then moving on to the head, just adding permablood where I see fit. I'm wiping it off in some areas, smudging it, globbing it on. It's really a personal preference. I just like the blood to tell a story. It has to be there for a reason. Now moving on to the steak, I'm just using a Sharpie to add in the thread detail as well as outline the edges. This is just a super fast cheater way and nobody's really going to be looking at this underside anyways. I'm now grabbing my favorite rust colored paint with a sponge and I'm just dabbing it on top, and now I'm going back through with some black paint just to distress and age it down slightly and then wiping it off. I'm now using my rag and just cleaning up any areas and adding some shadowing with the airbrush, as well as using some alcohol to just kind of wipe the airbrushing around so it doesn't look so neat. And here's how the sign and steak turned out. Not bad. The last thing I wanted to do was I wanted to create a wet, sweaty, nasty, shiny texture over the hands and head. So I'm using Fright Props wet product and mixing it with some water and then applying it with an airbrush. This will help create a protective coating over the entire paint job, as well as keep the head and hands looking like wet, rotten flesh. It's really an amazing product. It goes a long ways and I use it for everything. But I'm just going back and forth between the head and the hands and adding about 2 or 3 coats of the product. And here's the finished head. Now that everything's dry, I'm going to start putting this guy back together. First things first, I have to put on the undershirt and add some blood around the staked area. I'm using permablood and a chip brush. You can see now that by changing the undershirt from gray to white, the blood really pops around the stake area. Now I'm going to put his shirt and lab coat back on, feed the arms through, and start painting. I'm going to be adding some sweat with some yellow spray paint around the neck and shoulders. I wanted to do this before I closed up the shirt and attached his hands so they wouldn't get in the way. I'm just attaching the hands to the foam in the arms with the zip ties through the holes just how they had it before. And I'm going back through with some yellow and some ivory spray paint just to kind of dirty him up a little bit, sweat him up a little bit. We want him to look pretty gnarly and nasty. Obviously he looks fairly rotten and this zombie has had a couple of rough days. I'm going back in with some brown spray paint just to hit the sleeves, the bottom of the jacket, anywhere that I think would hit dirt. I'm also spray painting the sign a bit just to darken it up and add some texture to it. Now I'm attaching the syringe to his neck with some hot glue. But I bet you're wondering how I got those super cool tire tracks all over the jacket to make sure he looked like he got ran over by Grandpa. Yeah, there's nothing better than the simplest of solutions and fixes. I used the tire of my car. I just grabbed some watered down black paint, painted it over the tire, and ran it over several times. I always love how sometimes the most obvious and simplest solutions just work best, but it looked awesome. Now moving on to adding some mud to his shoes and to the base of the lab coat. I'm using the same thing that I used in my clown shoes video, as well as the mummy prop. It's acrylic latex caulk. It's commonly used for windows and doors. It dries to a matte finish and it has some great texture to it. I love it, it's waterproof, and it just creates a really awesome mud texture. I'm adding it to the knees, I'm adding it to the bottom of the jacket, as well as to any of the tire track areas, just to enhance them. And finally going around and do the detailing with the blood. I added some to the sign by using a straw, as well as put some handprints on his shoulders using my gloves and a brush. And here's the finished result. It turned out awesome. Even with all the weather problems we had this week, this prop turned out awesome. Now this was a plan B from the original vampire version we had started and will finish later, but I'm so glad I got an opportunity to work on the Punctured Pete prop and turn him into a Resident Evil zombie doctor completely worthy of our retirement home display. Sometimes it just feels good to go back to where you started, and for us, that was always with zombies. My first prop that I painted and redid was a zombie prop years and years and years ago, and I fell in love with it. And it felt great to get back and just do another straight zombie repaint and really pay homage to the Punctured Pete creators and the prop. I really think this is what the original intention of this prop was. It's really wonderfully designed and it came together awesome. He's going to fit perfectly into our display, and I'm excited that I get to do 2 Punctured Pete makeovers. So stick around for the demo footage, and thank you guys so much for watching.
Hey y'all, it's Kellen. I hope you enjoyed the makeover video for Punctured Pete. It was an absolute blast to work on. Now I noticed a lot of people when they were looking at Punctured Pete in some of the unboxing videos and also the store videos, I noticed people were commenting that they didn't really appreciate that it was a constant motion prop. I have to admit we didn't really appreciate it either. However, the workaround we found was using some of these motion sensors. I purchased these off of Amazon particularly for the reason because they have a 6-foot cord between the base station and the motion sensor. This worked fantastic for Punctured Pete. It has low time settings so I can set it for 1 or 2 minutes. It runs and then actually deactivates the power, turns the prop off, and then reactivates the motion sensor. Also with the cord, you can take the motion sensor and place it well before the prop, that way it actually activates in time, and this helped out a ton. So if you're looking to upgrade your Punctured Pete to a non-constant motion prop, just add a motion sensor to it. There's also plenty of videos out there that show you how to build your own motion sensors at home. So the zombie version of Punctured Pete was actually a plan B. We've had some pretty gnarly weather here in Texas where we've gone from 108 down to 50 degrees and we've had a lot of rain. So the original version of Punctured Pete, which is a vampire version, didn't actually come to fruition because all of the pieces weren't drying. So to make up for that, we actually went out and purchased a second Punctured Pete, and that is the zombie version of Punctured Pete you see behind me. I am ecstatic with how this version turned out. I know originally I wanted to do the vampire version, and of course we already have that prop in progress, so there will be a future video on that, and I will get to play around with that concept. But I loved how the zombie version turned out. I think it's much truer to the original prop as opposed to a complete makeover. And hey, anybody that knows me knows that I love Resident Evil and I love zombies, so it works perfectly for our display. But be sure to hit the subscribe button if you want to see the future makeover on Punctured Pete in our vampire version. We just wanted to say from the bottom of our hearts, thank you guys so much for the overwhelming support. We had no idea the makeover videos would be this well received, and we absolutely read every single comment and we appreciate every single one of you. So thank you so much. Now if you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit that like button right in the face. It's down here somewhere. Also, if you're interested in future makeover videos, be sure to hit the subscribe button. We also have other Halloween related content as well as original prop builds and just some behind the scenes of our haunt. If you're interested in that, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I hope y'all are staying safe, and remember, if you create it, they will come. Bye y'all.
Are we almost done? Because I'm hungry. Oh, I want pizza or Snickers.